Good afternoon. Also from my side, I was asked to shortly introduce basically eHub and Nest, two demonstrate and research facilities we're hosting at EMPA. It's not coinciding actually with our very research we're doing within SCCR, but it's certainly linked to the thermal energy storage activities we're doing. So I want to focus more on the thermal part. This also involves electrical part, but it's more like of a focus on thermal systems. So why do we need demonstrators and research platforms, and how can they be of value for applied energy research? Well, first, it's a real environment for technology integration and testing. And in case like Nest, where we have a living lab, it's also an interaction, first interaction of novel technologies with potential users. So there we get this user feedback. A very important aspect is that in such demonstration, it's allowed to take, we are allowed to take risks. So failure is an option, and that's typically a problem, especially in the building sector, where the risk aversion, or like investors, of course, reluctant to take risks, and they want mature technologies and not novel technologies. So also it fosters the industry, the collaboration with industry and academia. So public-private partnership, co-creation spaces are important to drive potential innovations. But also visibility. We have Lighthouse, so it's important that you do something and you shout it out loud, that people see that actually something new is there and can be adopted by the market. And it's last but not least, a great chance for systemic research, because most of us dealing with single technologies or even below, like with specific processes. But in the end, it's all about bringing things together and have it running at a system level. And I think that on the energy perspective, systemic research is one of the important cornerstones of future energy research, I believe. So Nest is first nothing else but an empty shelf. As you see it here, it's a concrete structure which is ready to take up and to hold buildings. So this is what it could look like once it's populated with several buildings. So the Nest structure can hold up to 15 or 14 of those units. Is that? Yeah. So these experimental buildings, we call those units. And these buildings themselves, they have some major research challenge formulated. For instance, this thing here that should be built in the coming year, hopefully, is about lightweight structure. Others have the major topic on functionalized wood, others on solar gain through facade, and so on. So Nest is able to take up these buildings. That's what you see above the ground. So below the ground is where we have the energy hub, another demonstrator that we call eHub. So that's the whole energy technologies being in the stack of Nest. So what is an energy hub conceptually? It's just a multi-carrier energy system which incorporates different energy conversion, storage, but also network technologies. And it relates the loads on one hand with the energy vectors on the other hand. And that is what it looks like at EMPA. That's our very energy hub. So we have on the load side, we have Nest with all those buildings representing real loads from buildings, but we have also Move, another demonstrator, which I will introduce shortly after that. And we have three different grids with three different energy carriers. We have thermal energy grid, we have electrical grid and gas, and we have different technologies that are hooked up. So how can we do now research on such a platform? We can now choose how to connect, how to run experiments, and what technologies to involve in those experiments. We can, for instance, say we want to have PV batteries, fuel cells, but also heat pump coupled to it and ice storage, or we can choose any other combination of technologies from PV, supercondensers, hydrogen storage, along with electrolyzers, and vehicle charging station. And we are free basically to connect those technologies as we want and design our experiments on a systemic level, pretty free. So this is besides Nest and eHub, there is the third energy demonstrated called MOVE. It's about future mobility, the assessment of different drivetrain technologies, but also, again, about the sectoral coupling between mobility sector and building sector, and see how those interact and how those each other can benefit from each other. So the thermal infrastructure, looking at Nest, is we have the loads. These are these units, the buildings. What we also have, we have 3 thermal grades. So we have high temperature at 65 degrees, and a mid temperature at around 37 degrees, and a low temperature grade about at 7 degrees. And now we're free to design, to decide, do we use for our units just the energy as it is being served from the energy hub, or do we want to implement heat pumps locally, or we can design all freely. And what we have here, we can use those grids to withdraw energy, but we can also dump energy into those grids on different levels. A unit, being a building, can, for instance, say, I want to have my local heat pump, and I use the low temperature grid as a low temperature source as if it was a ground heat exchanger for my heat pump. I can have my solar collectors and dump heat at the high temperature and introduce it in this level. And since Nest is not a building but a vertical district, it's also a district system which allows for redistribution of energy streams between different units. We have great flexibility here. We can, on one hand, say, let's try to use this or operate this district Nest in an island mode, so be autonomous on a district level, not on a building level. And we can cut our connections to the EMPA campus. Or we say we want to exchange energy with the EMPA energy system, so we're free to do that. So, also, if we have too much energy in one grid and we want to dump it elsewhere, we have this possibility to do that among the grids. And that's very important, so it's a very versatile, very flexible infrastructure we have here to do energy research. Now we go below the ground. No, not yet, sorry. Another thing is, Nest is of course also like, if you want, so a small energy market. And when we were designing first the buildings in there, we were saying, what requirements do we put to the buildings? Are they standard buildings? Do they have to follow like the Minergie standards or anything? And we said we have to come up with something new that makes more sense with a perspective towards renewable energy integration. And what we came up with is, what you see here is basically outside temperature. And what we have here is different prices for energy. So yellow is electricity, so we have high prices when the temperatures outside are low. So typically in winter time, and lower prices in summer. We have also different prices for weekdays or weekends, and we have different prices for the thermal energy depending on the temperature level and the season. And this is basically something which we try to incentivize the integration of renewable energy on a building scale, but also incentivize the implementation of some storage capacity also on a building level. And that's something where this is test. Let's say we started with this, and we want to see how what implication it has for the building design and operation. Going to below the ground to the energy hub, where the actual energy conversion and storage technologies are located, we have 2 heat pumps, which are basically in series, so from the low to the mid, and from mid to the high temperature grid. We have also different energy sources and storages, fuel cells, typical technologies you find there. And if we put all together, we have Nest with the loads, we have energy hub with the thermal components, but we also have, of course, an electrical part of Nest, electrical, so batteries and supercapacitors, and then Move, another demonstrator with electrolyzer, mobility charging station, and so on. Now I want to shortly just introduce the storage technologies we have implemented right now. This is, as I said, is a starter kit. We start with it, but it doesn't mean but no, it doesn't mean that we stay there, but we want to extend that, and it's very flexible. We can add more storage technologies, and it's also, I say, in an open, it's a research platform to have technologies coming out of the SSE being integrated in NEST and Energy Hub. So standard technologies in one way is energy harvesting with ground heat exchangers that are very shallow, only 10 meters deep in the groundwater, in the flowing groundwater, so actually extracting heat, so it's just energy harvesting. For the ground heat exchanger, typical ones that go to roughly 300 meters, there we have some aspects of energy storage because we are regenerating seasonally, but we also can go up because of the PEX material up to 60 degrees and charge the ground very short term with high temperatures, excess energy, for instance, from solar thermal collectors, and then take it out again with high temperatures in a very short term. This is another storage, ice storage. We have 65 cubic meters of ice storage, and this is very interesting as we have mixed load profiles. We have offices, we have apartments in Nest, so we hope also that we can do cooling and heating in a very efficient way because we have these mixed load profiles. This would be a movie, but it doesn't matter. What we see with the camera is just we can see charging, discharging, how the freezing starts among the heat, along the heat exchangers, and that's it. So now what is of most importance for the research of my group is actually the integration possibility we have for seasonal thermal energy storage. And that's what I meant. Energy Hub is there. Now it's ready to implement or integrate more new storage technologies. So with our sorption-based seasonal storage, we are going to place within the SSCR roadmap within 2020 in the Energy Hub. We will hook it up to the low temperature grid, which we will need to discharge our storage. So it's mimicking in a way, for instance, a ground heat exchanger. And we're gonna bring the heat during discharge onto the mid temperature grid at roughly 40 kelvins for heating of the apartments. And of course, we can use high temperature heat for charging the storage in winter time, and summertime, sorry, with renewable energy at 60 degrees. So just what activities are running now so far? You see we're just ramping up the system, ramping up the operation of those demonstrators, and I just want to give you a short insight of some projects or activities that have been started. One thing is an internal project. It's about studying grid reserve through HVAC control, and there the heat pump plays the very central role because it's coupling the heat and the electricity together. So what we are working on now is more like characterization of the energy system and heat pump and the components. So for instance, just running many experiments studying the coefficient of performance for different power, output powers, and different temperature combinations, that we have an understanding how we have to control this system for studying grid reserves impact. Another thing is we want to design our experiments freely. We have to have a maximum degree of freedom, so we have to also say we want to assume some design and demand profile, for instance. So building demand emulation is important. This is an experiment we did. So the red curve you see, this is the thermal power output. So we say we want to have a fixtures demand curve, a load profile which looks like this, and then run the Energy Hub and try to follow this pattern. And that's what you see here. There are some measuring errors, but this works very well with the heat pump and the excess heat that is dumped, for instance, to the ground heat exchanger. Another example of a project running on the Energy Hub, now I'm moving from the thermal side to the electrical side, is Comelec, which is part of the is an NRP 70 project run by EPFL. This is about the question of what happens if we have 100% renewables And how does it affect our distribution grids? Of course, we know power quality problems, and we need compensation by fuel-based conventional generators typically today. But we want to overcome this with smart real-time control. So the idea is installing a microgrid, and that's what is being implemented at EMPA campus as well, where we have grid agent, which is looking at the state or the status on the electricity grid, and resource agent sitting at the resource level, at the building level, and for instance, and communicating together. Basically, the building control says, I would like to consume 0 to 50 kilowatts in the next hour, and the battery pack hooked up to this system says, I can either consume or produce, and then the grid agent say, please consume 50 kilowatts resource agent A, and please 20 resource agent B. And this is the physical implementation, how it looks like with the different resources, like these are the unit loads, these are the heat pumps, batteries, supercapacitor, and here is the move. It's all been connected, and the microgrid will be implemented and tested then at EMPA. Now this is already my last slide, so I made it rather short. So I'll just have more time, or maybe
it's okay.
Oh, it's okay. So I'm in time, hopefully. I didn't hear the bell ring. So. My last slide, promise. No, I just want to emphasize the importance of those demonstrators and research platforms for systemic research and the energy transition. And we're also benefiting that we have a platform where we can integrate and test our technologies, and we welcome you to bring your technology to those platforms and make it richer. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, this is the very last slide. I was asked to put our work into context. So work package 1, thermal energy storage, is where we are doing research on within SCCR.